The Earth goes through periodic cooling periods known as ice ages, with the last ice age ending a few tens of thousands of years ago. Today, we're resting comfortably in the middle of a mild climate period, which means moderate winters in most places around the world and year-long sunshine in California. But today, we're also capable of changing the environment artificially and are already doing so via uncontrolled release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which are warming the planet. But with thousands of nuclear weapons around the world primed to detonate, that warming trend could very quickly reverse and send us straight into a man-made ice age. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographics Show. Today we're asking, how can we survive a nuclear winter? The legendary astrophysicist Carl Sagan co-authored a paper in the 1980s called Climate and Smoke, an appraisal of nuclear winter. In this earth-shattering essay, Sagan and his partner James B. Pollock studied the physical effects a nuclear war would have on our planet and discovered that not only would such a war devastate nations, but it could potentially disrupt the global climate. By vaporizing debris and filling the atmosphere with ash, soot, and aerosols, a nuclear war would result in global dust clouds that would block the sun's rays for years, preventing the sun's energy from reaching the surface of the planet. This would trigger a cascade cooling effect, which would plummet global temperatures by as much as 22 degrees Celsius, turning sunny California into something more akin to blustery Seattle. The world would enter an artificial ice age. Though recent studies have shown that Sagan and Pollock's original estimates may have been a bit overzealous, our environment is incredibly fragile, and even a 10-degree drop in temperature would have dramatic repercussions. Not only would lower temperatures severely shorten growing seasons for crops, but all of that blocked sunlight would send weather and ocean current patterns that help keep the world mild today into disarray. The North Atlantic Drift is an ocean current that brings warm water heated by the sun in the equator to northern Europe, which in turn is why Europe is so far north yet enjoys mild weather and warm summers. With a decline in sunshine, this current will completely shut down, and without warm water being circulated around Europe and into the Mediterranean, Europe would begin to see weather close to what is common in Canada today. Spain and France's famous summertime beach destinations would be a thing of the past, and in fact, pretty much the entire Mediterranean would be far too chilly to go for a swim in. But it wouldn't be just sunny beaches that are a casualty of the nuclear winter. The North Atlantic Drift also helps bring favorable weather for growing crops to Europe, and without it, Europe would experience a catastrophic crop collapse during what little growing season may be left due to all the dust in the atmosphere. The east coast of the US is also dependent on ocean currents for its mild weather, and a global cooling that reached the equator would shut down the Gulf Stream along the US's shores. Originating in the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf Stream circulates warm water up along the east coast of the US and into southern Canada, helping bring mild temperatures to the area during spring and summer. Chilly temperatures would be hard enough to deal with, but all of that blocked sunlight would also shorten growing seasons for crops. With much reduced sunlight, humanity would be unable to grow enough crops to feed everyone alive today, and mass starvation would ensue. If current stockpiles of non-perishable goods could be evenly and fairly distributed, a doubtful circumstance in a post-apocalyptic world, it's possible that the majority of the population could survive a short-term nuclear winter. The length and severity of a nuclear winter would ultimately depend on the amount of weapons exchanged between combatants. But even a small regional exchange of just a few hundred low-yield weapons is estimated to plunge the Earth into a 10-year nuclear winter. Even with today's large stockpiles of non-perishable goods, there's simply no way the majority of the population could survive a decade of famine. Those that do survive, however, would face crippling vitamin and mineral deficiencies, leading to disease and illness, which would further decimate humanity's plunging population. In the midst of a nuclear winter, you'd probably be delighted to see a few shafts of sunlight through clouds full of choking dust. But beware, that sunlight could be lethal. That's because a nuclear war would destroy the ozone layer, meaning there would be little protection from the sun's harmful UV rays. Unless you slather up in the most powerful sunscreen you can find, basking in the sun for too long will result in severe sunburns and cancers. Your eyes would be especially sensitive to that intense UV radiation, and it would be vital to wear goggles or sunglasses with UV filters in order to keep yourself from going blind. Because UV rays can damage your eyes without you feeling it, your vision could become severely impaired without you realizing what is happening until it's too late. A nuclear winter would be clearly a nightmare scenario, but it might be survivable. After all, your ancestors already did. That's right, we're the descendant of a very small group of humans who have survived an ancient nuclear winter. 75,000 years ago, a supervolcano in modern-day Lake Toba, Sumatra, erupted with a fury equivalent to thousands of nuclear bombs and was 100 times greater than the 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora, which resulted in 1816's year without a summer. Injecting 6 billion tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, the eruption dropped global temperatures by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius for 3 years, and further cooling lasting decades. Though scientists differ on the severity of the cooling, the Toba supereruption is widely credited with creating a genetic bottleneck in human evolution, during which the human population dropped suddenly to a surviving population of only about 3,000 to 10,000 individuals. So though a nuclear winter sounds bad, know that you are already genetically predisposed to survive one. But how exactly can you help your odds of survival? First, you'll want to tackle your greatest threat: the cold. Insulating your home will be critical to keeping warm. And if you don't know anything about insulation or construction, now is a good time to learn at least how to use spray foam insulation materials. Fuel supplies will run critically low very quickly, and even trees may become scarce if there's not enough sunlight for them to grow. You're going to want to keep out as much cold as possible while keeping in as much heat as you can at all times. Secondly, you'll want to secure a fresh water drinking supply. A nuclear winter may paradoxically not necessarily result in snow, as disrupted weather patterns and a lack of evaporation and thus precipitation may turn the world into a frozen desert. Even if there is snow where you are though, it's likely to be highly contaminated with radioactive or other particles from the trillions of tons of debris ejected into the atmosphere by the nuclear bombs. Emergency water filters will be critical for your health, as well as water purification tablets and possibly iodine pills for radiation poisoning. It goes without saying that intense radiation will also be a hazard, but you are in fact not very likely to be irradiated in a nuclear winter to stay out of ground zero blast zones. That's because a nuclear weapon is designed to air burst or explode several hundred to a few thousand meters above its target. This is because if the bomb were to explode on the ground, the blast wave would be mitigated by terrain and buildings, severely limiting the explosive potential of a nuclear bomb. High up in the air though, a blast wave can spread for several miles without being dampened by the hilly terrain or dense clusters of buildings. An airburst detonation will also ensure that the majority of the radiation from an explosion will actually be projected upwards into space, while a ground burst detonation will irradiate millions of tons of soil, which will be carried by the wind. So stay out of large craters, and you shouldn't be turning into a Fallout-style ghoul anytime soon. Your third concern will be to secure a food supply. This may be trickier than finding water or keeping warm, as even perishable goods will quickly become scarce. And with most nuclear weapons aimed at major manufacturing and distribution centers, it's unlikely you'll find much that will be safe to scavenge without irradiating yourself. Hunting and fishing may seem a viable alternative, but the world operates on a complex food web with organisms feeding on each other, and at the very bottom of that food web sits the sun. It doesn't matter if you're a polar bear or an Antarctic leopard seal. The food you eat inevitably eats food that in turn eats something that grows thanks to the sun. Polar bears, for instance, hunt seals, who in turn hunt small fish, who in turn feed on krill or plankton, which depend on the sun. Global food chains will collapse inevitably, but with a severely diminished population, you just might be able to eke out enough hunting and fishing to survive. If not, well, there's always billions of freshly barbecued human bodies lying around. A nuclear winter would decimate civilization and possibly drive humanity to the brink of extinction, but this isn't a threat we haven't faced before. As the Toba supervolcano showed us, we as a species have what it takes to survive and thrive in the face of any disaster. And with these catastrophes acting as genetic bottlenecks, our children will be even more capable of surviving whatever the future throws at them.